And we're live. Yeah, let's see. Look all around and welcome to another episode of the Professional Practice Builder Society Weekly Tips, Tricks, Strategies, Theories, Conclusions.
We're going to come up with a shorter name, Chris.
Oh, wait a minute. That's right. Shorter for most people means actually shorter, not like me, which means, kind of longer. So, anyway, so folks, hope you're sitting down and having a pen and getting ready to take some notes, because Mark and I think we have some stuff. We think we have some good stuff for the folks this week, right, Mark?
Absolutely. Hey, we're talking about the fact, not to insult anyone, but your jargon is just not all that hot and sexy, man.
It is not. That is completely correct.
I mean, my jargon is, no, nobody's jargon is hot and sexy. That's the issue tonight. Not just your jargon, anyone's jargon.
Exactly. And it's interesting because, most people in the business, so to speak, in whatever business that's in, they get used to talking in their own terms, in their own jargon, right? Right, Mark?
Well, you don't even notice it happening, right? I mean, you're getting trained in some area of expertise. We tend to work with experts like coaches and healthcare professionals and attorneys and the like. And so you're either in graduate training or some kind of specialized training, and you start to absorb a language that you don't even notice at first, because you're spending a lot of time talking to your peers, and you're kind of inside a bubble. And you start to forget after a little while, it doesn't take long, that your clients don't live inside the same bubble, and that they speak the language of their pain. They speak the language of their problems. And we've spent a lot of time talking about why you need to kind of really focus on your ideal client and start getting into that problem language, as opposed to what you learned in grad school or in your specialty training, right? That's where we're really getting to. And so, that's why it's not hot and sexy. It might be hot and sexy to you and your peers, but it's not hot and sexy to your client. And let's face it, we're talking about attracting your ideal client to your practice so you can grow.
Exactly. So this week, this episode kicks off our overall theme for June, which is attraction-based content made simple, the key to being number one in your market. And the first step in there really revolves around jargon. Because it's interesting, as we were putting this whole episode together, and really this whole month, we looked back and said, part of what we need to do is have a quick, brief 2-second, reminder of our IDAP system, because identifying the ideal client's problems really is the key. And for those of you who haven't seen the IDAP system, or for those of you who aren't part of the Professional Practice Builder Society, there's probably a link somewhere on the page you're watching that you can come and join us and get all this great information. But once you identify their problem, if you talk about it in terms of their jargon, or in terms of your jargon, you're not going to be able to track them, right, Dr. Mark?
Right. And the theme, for this month, what we want to help you do is, last month, in previous episodes, when we went through IDAP, we're really talking about an individual piece of content that you're creating. But what we want to get to here is the fact that if you want to get found online, you have to be consistently creating content for this ideal client. So we got to get to a higher level of planning eventually here. So, and that's why we say we want to make this really simple. We want to get it simple so that you will continue to consistently create great content, not just start something and then stop. So yes, you start by identifying not just a problem, but lots of problems that you can solve. So if you have to start with your jargon, you want to get it to the more interesting language that your ideal client uses. So if you have to, just jot down the jargony version of what it is you do for your clients, but then start to translate it and start making that list of, so that you're starting from where they are. You're starting from the problem they already know they have. Because that's honestly what they're going to go online to search for. When they go to that search engine and they start typing some words in, they're going to use their own language. They don't know to use your language. So you want to start making that list of problems, and you want to start to using all of their words. Just start writing them down, literally on a list, and then we want to get to the 3 easy steps for today, which is start where they are, start these words down, and then start looking across the different words for some themes, the way they start to cluster together. And if you start doing that, you're on the right road.
Exactly. And it's interesting, Mark, you bring up the 3 bullet points. And later this month, actually later in this series, you're going to find out about the 143 system, which makes content creating simple. That's going to be, a couple of episodes from now. Or, of course, you could join us in the Professional Practice Builder Society. If you're watching this on Wednesday, when we're recording, if you're watching this live on Wednesday, or if you're getting this on Wednesday, tomorrow we, I think, have a members-only webinar that you could actually join. But in lieu of that, or if you happen to be watching this 16 years from now, and this is still out on YouTube somewhere, which it probably will be, the whole point is this. Later on in this series, we're going to teach you about the 143 system. In the vein of the 143 system, part of that is 3 bullet points to talk about when you're talking to your ideal client. So for this episode, the 3 bullet points we want you to focus on are: 1, start with the problem that your client already knows they have; 2, create a list of words the client uses to describe those problems; and then 3 is really rinse and repeat until you either have all of your client's problems documented, so to speak, or until you come up with 4 that you can group together. Now, remember, we told you about the 143 system, so the 4 should kind of ring a bell. You'll learn more about that in a couple of episodes. But let's, we're about halfway through, but let's try and be a little bit more focused and really focus in on maybe an example or a story or 2, Mark, that we have about.
Because here's the thing: the reason we're focusing on this is that I don't know about you, Chris, but I have constantly run across folks who tell me a similar story, and I got to tell you, I'm one of those folks. I've done this any number of times myself, where you start, building some content around a particular area that you want to, become recognized for or found for on the web. But the hard part is having the staying power, the consistency to be regularly producing things. If you just focus on creating one great blog post or one great video, your energy goes into that. But if you're trying to be consistent and have something week after week, so you're creating layers of things on the web for people to find, you need to keep it simple, and you need to kind of create this kind of rhythm that we're talking about, create these themes. So we want you to think in bigger themes than just individual episodes or individual blog posts or individual videos. Because if you can think of the bigger theme, if you can discover the bigger theme that your ideal client cares about, now you can actually, tap that well numerous times on that theme to flesh it out and show your expertise and create a series of bits of content that are going to be small enough and easy enough for them to digest and engage with, but over time are multiple pieces, multiple steps even. So it can be one big problem that you've broken down into 4 sub components. Or it could be four problems that cluster together in a bigger theme. So I was recently working with a dentist, and I was trying to get him to think this way, this thematic kind of way. And there were several blog posts he had written that had to do with dealing with crooked teeth, in my non-technical way of putting it, because his jargon is not that sexy, right? So crooked teeth. But they all kind of clustered together because they all had to do with different kinds of braces. Maybe somebody was into Invisalign, maybe somebody wanted colored braces, but they all had to do with this theme, and they cluster together. So by thinking of the bigger theme and identifying the bigger theme, he was able to then organize a whole sort of category of pieces of content that he was going to create. So it just kind of helps you create that continuity over time, and that's why this is so useful to kind of be thinking of how do these problems cluster together? What's the bigger group?
Yeah, and what we've found through all the clients that we've worked with and all the research that we've done is that it's much easier for most people to go out and think of small bits first and really break it down and see all the components first, and then start putting them together almost like some puzzle pieces, so to speak, and start saying, okay, where does this all fit together, and then pull those in and put them kind of in groups. And I guess that's the best way I can put it. From all the research and from everything else that we've done, you look at it and say, well, some people are big picture thinkers and they just picture these big themes, and it's tough for them to get down to the granular level. Most people are out there, and you can think of the individual problems and the individual things that you're faced with on a daily basis. Look at it that way. You're faced with these things on a daily basis from your ideal clients. So it's a matter of taking those things that you're faced with on a daily basis and then starting to group them together to think of bigger problems and bigger themes. I'm going to give you 2 other real quick examples. One is from the medical profession, and that's all of these new overarching diagnoses that seem to come out every other day. In fact, well, here's the thing of it. I freely admit I used to kind of turn my head a little sideways and question it and go, man, when we were growing up, there was just you were you
were healthy or sick. There were just those two, right? Two categories.
But now even and Dr. Mark, I know you're not in this area of doctoring, but they've just now come up with a new condition for or classified a new condition for deaf people called, I think it's 24-hour syndrome. Have you heard about this? Where their body clock, where they're now finding their body clocks can't regulate, and they have insomnia, but it's because they can't see and they're not getting any lights in. Well, to get to that diagnosis, they probably had groups of people who were hearing impaired, and some who were completely deaf, and some who had cochlear implants, and they went through.
Say deaf or blind?
Oh, I'm sorry, blind. Yeah, but deaf.
You have me confused there, man.
Yeah. Okay,
blind,
so
blind, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Now I'm on the right wavelength.
Oh, this has been one long day. But the whole point is this: is they took different groups of people who had seemingly similar or some similar conditions, put them together and figured out a larger, bigger thematic thing to do. And it's just like I said, it's a lot like a lot of other like autism spectrum disorder. It's like taking disparate things, pulling and figuring out where they all fit together. The other example I'm going to give you is kind of is something that you might see as a big picture thing, but actually has to be done in little pieces for you to be successful, and that's climbing a mountain. I was reminded of this story last night when I was in a mastermind group. But when you climb, most people who don't know about climbing think that when you climb Mount Everest, you go to the bottom and you start walking and you start climbing and you don't stop till you hit the top. Don't stop. Sorry, I was going to do a little music dance here, but that's just not happening today. But if you talk to anybody who's actually summited Mount Everest and climbed Mount Everest, what happens is they go to base camp and they sit at base camp for a couple of weeks. And for those of you who climbed, I might not be getting the times exactly right. So email me, let me know, like you, Werner Berger. Email me, let me know, we'll get it right next time. But the whole point is they sit at base camp for a couple of weeks. Then they climb up to the first landing.
Right.
They wait there.
There's several base camps up at different altitudes to get they get acclimatized, as they say.
Well, here's the thing, but they get acclimatized, but then they climb back down. Mm-hmm. And they kind of rest a little bit, and then they climb up to the second one, and then they go back down. So there's pieces involved in even something that looks like it's one task of climbing a mountain. So the whole point is this, and we got a couple of minutes left, and I'll throw it back to you in a second, Dr. Mark, so you can give us a last 2-minute story, because I'm sure you've got another one. But before we do that, the whole point is this, is when you're working on this piece of the puzzle, remember, your jargon isn't hot and sexy. So what you got to do is start off with the problems that the problems that you already know your clients have, and then work on describing them in a way that's going to resonate with your clients. Meaning, what language is your clients using? What language are your clients using every single day to talk to you and to interact with you? That's the language they're using, and then you're just going to rinse and repeat that until you either get 4 that you can see as a natural group, or until you've identified all your ideal clients' problems. Mark, you probably have another 1.5-minute story you want to tell. If not, I'm sure you'll come up with one.
I'll just give you a different way of thinking about this. Is that I like to be as efficient as I can. I don't know. I rarely succeed, but I want to be as efficient as I can when I'm kind of creating content. And so I'm always trying to think of a future use for something that I'm going to do at some point. And so one of the ways to sort of conceive of this idea of why grouping and themes is important is that instead of just thinking of one little piece of content at a time or one very specific thing, which you need to do, we can talk. We've talked about that in previous episodes. But you want to think in groups, because you might want to take a series of blog posts or a series of podcasts or a series of videos and make it into something larger. You might want to ultimately produce a series of ebooks, and so you can start to organize this in the same way that a couple of years ago when I sat down to write a book. I mean, writing a book is like this big, giant, daunting task if you try to think of doing it all at once. It's kind of like climbing Mount Everest, but by breaking it down into subsections, you start to make it into more manageable chunks. But you don't just write random paragraphs, right? I mean, you don't just write a bunch of random paragraphs and then try to figure out what the bigger issue is after the fact. That's the hard way. I mean, I suppose you could do that. It's a lot easier if you start mapping out individual things and figuring out what the bigger theme is before you start creating the content, because now you know where you're going to go. It's like if I'm doing a literal TV show, I need to know what the cliffhanger is going to be. I need to know what the scenes for next week are, so that I can kind of foreshadow those and just kind of bring this together into something bigger that I can use afterwards. So whether you're going to create that bigger thing or whether you're trying to help your audience kind of feel the connection between the different pieces that you're creating, or whether you are, literally trying to create that bigger entity later on and recycle some of this content for a bigger purpose, or create a product out of it that you could sell. So these are some of the other reasons for why you just want to think in terms of themes, think in terms of bigger chunks. When you're about to create something, say, well, does this relate to a series I could create? Are there 3 or 4 blog posts? We're going to talk about 4 later, but 4 is a good number for a lot of reasons.
Exactly. So identify things in the small term, but always have the big picture in the back of your mind is an easy way to say it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
What he said. Yeah.
Exactly. So remember, before we bring on our special guest this week, remember, your jargon isn't hot and sexy. Start with the problem the client already knows that they have. Create a list of words the client uses to describe their problems. Remember, the client uses, not you. And then rinse and repeat until you have
a bunch of them.
Until you have
you start seeing those clusters.
Exactly. And now, next, kind of, sort of now, have to. We love to make you laugh. Here's what we're going to do. We are going to bring on the woman who actually came up with the "your jargon is not hot and sexy." If I do remember correctly, Dr. Mark, wasn't it
I believe
Hannah?
It was all her fault.
I think it was her suggestion. So we're going to bring on Hannah Tai. She is the LinkedIn expert, at least,
She's certainly our LinkedIn expert.
That's it. We're going to bring in LinkedIn expert Hannah Tai. She also runs Chatterbox Social Media. You might remember her from previous episodes where she came on and gave you some LinkedIn tips, and we have her now live on the screen. How you doing today, Hannah?
Fantastic, Chris. How are you?
Wonderful. It's great to see you again. So we're going to be talking more about LinkedIn tonight, if I understand things right.
Great.
Excellent.
Hi, Mark.
Hello, Hannah. Welcome back. We're glad to have you on the show. The show always looks better when Hannah's on.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
So, Hannah, what are we talking about tonight? We're talking about LinkedIn. We're talking about the importance of LinkedIn. But where should people get started with LinkedIn, I think?
Okay. So typically, people say, oh, I need to optimize my profile, or I need to have a really hot and sexy profile, right? So what we're going to talk about is there's a step that we need to take before that, which you guys have actually spoke quite eloquently about, which is really making sure that you have honed down and found your ideal prospect, right? Because everything that you're doing on LinkedIn, all the activities, from creating your profile and optimizing it, as well as, doing your actual prospecting, what kind of groups you're going to join, all of that stems from making sure you're really identifying your target client.
Yeah, I think, even if you think remind me of the history, but LinkedIn originally, I think, started almost like a resumes kind of site, didn't it? Isn't that the original history of LinkedIn, or did I just make that up?
Yeah, but
kind of, sort of ish,
That's kind of how it was for many years. You just kind of, put your little billboard up there, and you basically vomited about yourself. And,
well, that was my point. I was going to say, even in creating a resume or a kind of a bio, I've made this mistake any number of times. You end up, really writing it from your own point of view. It's like I'm talking to myself about myself. It's like it becomes this really kind of weirdly narcissistic thing. And to a degree, you have to do that. But, it doesn't work very well unless you do exactly what you're advising people to do, which is you got to remember you're creating this profile for someone else to read. It might be it's about you, but it's really about them, right? That's the important ingredient here.
Exactly. And just like what you guys were talking about, as far as, having that jargon in there, you really want to make sure that you're, again, really pinpointing what those issues are that your target client is really, dealing with, and making sure that you're speaking in terms that they can really identify themselves and see that you have the expertise to help them with that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great point. It's so amazing every time we hear you talk about LinkedIn, because you always stand up so straight, and you're always sitting so nice and tall. You're kind of tall, and you're always so excited. So anyway, I just figured I'd interject because Hannah's sitting very tall at this point, and all excited. Back to you, Mark. I just had to say something.
So Hannah, how should I do that? If I'm going to go in and tweak my profile and make it more focused on my ideal client, give me some suggestions. How should I go about doing that?
Sure. So the very first thing you really want to do is you want to make sure that you're not just marketing to, like someone will say, oh, well, I market to marketing managers. Okay, well, that's great. But there's, 100,000 marketing managers in the, Philadelphia area. So you really want to make sure, number one, what industry are they in? So what have you had success in the past?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have testimonials that talk about, maybe you've worked in the healthcare industry and you have people who work with you and love you. So you want to kind of do a little bit of thinking before you actually start crafting your profile or any of that. You want to think of, like, who do you really love to work with? So who do you resonate with?
Mm-hmm.
And what industries are they in? What industries have you had, measured success in? And what geographical area are they in? Are you international? Are you looking to target people? Will you only go, 30 miles outside of your house? Will you do on-site meetings? So all of that really goes into when you first start sitting down and trying to think about your LinkedIn strategy.
Yeah, you remind me of somebody I worked with in the past. I mean, who I thought actually was pretty clever. Chris and I were just talking about jargon and trying to translate your jargon into the actual language that your ideal client uses. But I worked with a consultant at one point, and when he was looking to get hired for another consulting gig, what he would do is go to the LinkedIn profiles of the people who had hired him in the past, and the people that he wanted to get hired by. He was kind of profiling those folks on LinkedIn, and he would look at the language they were using on their LinkedIn profile and on recommendations they had written for people that had worked with them in the past. And he said, okay, well, that's the language that this person that I literally want to get hired is using, and he would then go and work some of that language into his own profile. What do you think about that idea?
Exactly. Yeah. So you definitely, you want to see what is the issues that you kind of cut out there, Mark, so I apologize.
Oh, okay.
Hear all of that.
Sorry about that.
But you definitely want to make sure that you're thinking about what are their issues or their problems or whatever, and also what kind of language resonates with them. What things do they say? What kind of the jargon, as you say, there are some things, as much as you don't want to use jargon all the time so you sound like a robot, if there are specific things that the industry recognizes, obviously
right.
You want to use that, right, so that it resonates with them. So that's something that you do want to do. So if you look at those profiles, like you were saying, you can kind of pick those pieces out.
Well, and let me interject for a second. When you really say the industry, what you really mean is that if it's something that is public, like as an example, a real quick example would be, Googling things. I mean, even though Google and searching is, a little more technical, but when somebody says, hey, you're going to Google this, it's generally accepted, even though that's probably a piece of IT jargon, it's generally accepted that everybody knows what you're talking about. Is that what you mean when you pretty much say, look, if a piece, the only time jargon is okay is when the general accepted public, or when your ideal client is going to recognize
right.
and resonate with that.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Chris. That's exactly the point. Because, it depends on who your ideal client is, right? I have a guy who sells software to IT professionals, right? So he uses a lot of jargon, but it makes perfect sense in his world to do that because he's speaking the jargon that his ideal client speaks. He's not speaking insider language to an outside audience. He's speaking insider language to an inside audience. So that's why I think, Hannah, you're so clear in what you're saying in terms of being clear who you're creating this LinkedIn profile for, right? I mean, because
and really making sure that if you can really think of the people that you love working with, and the people that you have had some success with or that you resonate with. For instance, I could market to marketing directors in the financial industry, okay? Mm-hmm. But I love working with creative people. I love that energy, and I like helping them to, craft their strategy because they're a little bit, there's less restrictions on that, Mm-hmm. So I know going in that that's more my target profile, and everything that I do after that, from crafting my summary to what kind of groups I'm going to join to, how I, create my, my connection requests and things like that, it's all geared towards that specific client.
Right.
And what absolutely. They will see that, I can do to help them. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. It's knowing who that client is. It's knowing, Chris and I have worked a lot with coaches and consultants, and it depends. Is your end client, inside a particular industry, or are they kind of more in the general public? And so that kind of creates that dividing line for how much jargony stuff is going to end up on your profile or not. If you're speaking to people outside of your own bubble, then you don't want to use that language that is going to be confusing or off-putting or whatever. So you just want to use plain old English.
Exactly. Right.
So once I've got that person in my mind, I mean, where are the most critical places to kind of be working that into my profile? I mean, I haven't even looked at my profile in quite a while, I have to confess. I may have to get you to look at mine.
Yes, absolutely. So you want to actually use that, you want to be directing everything that you do towards how to solve their pain, right? Mm-hmm. And so how they can recognize that. So you want to have a benefit statement within your, and those keywords that they might search for you under in your headline, throughout your summary, in your experience titles. Just all throughout your profile, you're going to be using that language where people can understand what you do, how you help, and what differentiates you.
Right, yeah. That's definitely a big one too, because I mean, if your profile kind of looks the same as the rest of your competitors, then you're not doing anybody any favors either, right? And you're certainly not doing yourself any favors.
Right, and really, LinkedIn, the way that I teach LinkedIn or the way that I coach people is, really it's just people connecting to people. So, some other LinkedIn trainers might have a different strategy where, they're going to tell you to keyword stuff and do, all sorts of stuff to get the top of the thing. I don't do that. I don't want to work with people who want those kind of tactics. So, when you look at my profile or, someone that I coach, you really get a good sense of who they are, because that's what LinkedIn really is about. It's just people connecting to people. There's different tactics and things that you can use to, increase that happening. But again, you're always bringing yourself and your key differentiator of how you approach a problem to connect to that person.
Yeah, I like the way you're putting that, because I mean, it's especially if you're sort of, I'm going to say like maybe me and Chris and could get geeked out on certain things. I mean, you can lose sight of the fact that you are really creating this for people, as you just said. I mean, yes, you may have to pay attention to some optimizing and things like that to make it rank and all that good stuff. But in the end, if that's your focus, then you're probably not going to create a really engaging profile, because whatever. I always fall back on this little phrase of putting the social back in social media, right? I mean, if we're not creating it for people to engage with and read and consume and digest, and you're not keeping them in mind while you're creating, And I'm going to say that should be true of all content marketing, not just LinkedIn. Yeah. So the more you can keep that focused, the more human you can make it, the more it's good writing as opposed to purely optimized writing. It's just going to be It's going to work.
And also that's going to allow you to close the sale at the end and have a lovely relationship with your client, right? Mm-hmm. And that's really what you want. I mean, it doesn't matter if 1,000 people are looking at your profile if no one is actually bothering to pick up the phone, or you're not closing, the deal, and you're not helping people. I mean, so that's really what you want to think about is who do I help the most, and like how do I help them? And what industries do I have some success in? And just kind of start thinking about all that before you just start, randomly vomiting up, keywords or thinking, okay, well, I want marketing managers. No, you don't want marketing managers. Or maybe you do, but you could spend all day long and it's not going to be as effective. You want to really narrow that down, that target, and really, work that and create some really nice, beautiful relationships. And it's great. It's such a great network. I love it. It's really great. You build great business and just great relationships, and that's what it's about.
Yeah, and and I was going to say you're so right. It's interesting because Mark and I do focus a lot on keywords and writing in the terms of your ideal client, and it's great for when people are looking for you. And people do still search for people on LinkedIn, but I think you hit the nail on the head by saying that it's got to be, and I'll kind of translate it to say it's got to be the right mix of a good personable, something that's written good, that's personable to you, and the right words your client's looking for, because more people are going to be, are going to see a post that you have in a group, or they're going to stumble across your LinkedIn profile in any number of 1,000 different ways. And you want them, when they read it, to be attracted to you. You don't only want them to show up when they're searching for something. Is that kind of what you're getting
Chris.
to?
Exactly. Right.
Cool. Exactly. So we have about a minute left, and Hannah, is there? I mean, as far as LinkedIn goes and everything, you have a little summary. Or is there anything you really want to say to the folks? At least from this episode, because we have we will be bringing Hannah back on much more frequently. But Hannah, at least for tonight, is there anything else you wanted to say to the folks in summary here?
Yeah, I mean, just really take go through some of the lessons that Chris and Mark have gone through, where you really are narrowing down that target client of yours, and really think about that before you ever start, going in and tinkering and tweaking, different things. You really want to, again, narrow that down so that you can create a strategy, which we'll talk about a little bit more on, how to actively then connect and build connections and things like that.
Wonderful. Well, Hannah, it was great as always. Dr. Mark, any last words of wisdom for Hannah for this week?
What she said.
Exactly. Well, thank you for joining us this week, Hannah. And like I said, folks, we have some special surprises coming up. We'll let you in on in the near future. But I'm quite sure you'll be seeing much more of Hannah. And until then, Hannah, thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you guys so much. Have a good one.
Thank you
Take
too.
Care. See ya.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.
Wow, that was a great. Hannah's always great, Mark. I'll tell you, I always love bringing her. I always love bringing her on. It's always great to have her and her wisdom.
Well, and she's got good insights. And the fact is, LinkedIn is just so critical to certainly anyone who's building a professional practice. If you're going to invest some energy in your online presence, you definitely have to connect with Hannah. You have to listen to what she's saying. And you have to incorporate those teachings into your profile if you want to get some good results. So.
Exactly. Well, that just about wraps it up for another episode of the Professional Practice Builders Weekly Tips, Tricks, Strategy Society, all that other fun stuff. Exactly.
Join us at ppbsociety.com. That's all you need to know.
Exactly. So if you're not on ppbsociety.com, the link's at the bottom of the screen. Please go out there, join us. You'll be able to see copies of you'll be able to see while it's up, because these videos only stay up for a week, and to get get more involved, you need to kind of join us on the inside in the society. So you want to go out to ppbsociety.com. You want to at least sign up for the notifications every week, so you know when these episodes are going to be coming out. because you also never know when things might change, and you wouldn't want to miss this great information that we bring to you on a weekly basis. So until next time,
what he said.
What he said.